evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Talk Football. You're here with Danny and Jesse. Today, we're going to be discussing Chelsea. We're going to be discussing, in particular, the Boehly takeover and our thoughts on how that's going to affect the club going forward, how we think that the club's going to be run from the news that's coming out of the camp, the way that it's affected in the past, and how potentially this ownership's sad ending, especially for Chelsea fans, may have implications on future ownerships. So just going to be kicking off straight away. If you could like the stream, put your comments in for us, share and subscribe to us. We'd really, really appreciate it. We're really looking for your thoughts here, and we want to discuss anything that we can with you guys. So kicking us straight off, Chelsea, Jesse, been purchased by the Boehly Group consortium for circa 4.5 billion English pounds. Most expensive sports franchise to ever have been purchased. We believe this is down to the amount of money that was owed to the club through Roman Abramovich. So for you, what are your thoughts on Chelsea's new ownership? How do you think it's going to go?
Well, I think first off, let's just start off on kind of what was good and what was bad about Abramovich.
Yeah.
He came in at a time where it was unheard of to have an influx of cash, circa 200 million, almost. Not really. I mean, but in this day and age, it kind of, with inflation, it would add up to that.
Yeah.
So coming in and being able to buy, 6 or 7 elite players just off the bat, as a team who, let's be honest, they were top 4 contenders already.
Yeah,
they were not a bad team. It's not a rags to riches story, really, but they obviously did have that influx in cash.
Yeah,
I think that it's important to just keep in mind that at that time it was completely unheard of. Nowadays, we see a lot more either state-run clubs or people who are associated with states, whether they're an oligarch or they're an actual prince or a sheik or whomever it may be, coming in. Being able to spend a lot of money, and it's just never really happened. And the thing I would say about Abramovich and his reign is that this could be a massive positive with Boehly coming in.
Yes,
because I don't think, and I think there's substantial evidence here to say that he was coming to the end of his reign, to the extent where they were becoming less and less successful with teams like City and Liverpool becoming more successful.
And just to echo your point, so it was interesting because I was about 13, 14 years of age when Chelsea was purchased by Roman Abramovich, and it never really hit me at the time. We all knew how rich they were. It was quite big news over here in the UK. He was going to come in from Russia. He was this, middle-aged, successful businessman. He was going to be solely in charge of the club. His decisions, he's the one with the cash, and he's going to spend, and he did spend. And it's when you go back and you look at those transfers, is they were breaking records like all the time. They were making the marquee signings 3 or 4 times in a window, 3 or 4 times before. Yeah, you're right, mate. Like, it's good, isn't it? But yeah, so just coming in there, yeah. Well, there you go. It'll be an interesting question as to where it's going to go, and we'll bring that up in a little bit as to how this money's meant to be spent. So yeah. It was very interesting, and it was sort of it set a precedence as being basically, who do we need to buy? And they went through a number of very, very good purchases. Purchased players like Didier Drogba, they purchased players, Claude Makelele came in, numerous top players who worked out, but there was also the ones who didn't work. And I think that echoes your points now, is that it continued on throughout the ownership of Roman Abramovich, that it became to purchase the best player in that position. And now, while there's a number of other clubs, and with FFP that came in because of Chelsea and the way that the spending was, and it needed to protect other clubs and to ensure that there was at least a fair sort of playing field with the amount of external investment coming into a club. Looking now, I think you're right that his time, maybe in his ownership way, was probably due to end, because it's no longer how much you can spend, it's how well you actually spend it now.
Yeah, and I think that they made a couple. I mean, obviously they made a lot of mistakes, a lot of them in striker positions, which is kind of funny because those tend to be the most expensive players to buy.
Absolutely.
Ironic.
absolutely.
And it's ironic. I mean, the last purchase they made before he unfortunately or fortunately, I think it's fortunate. A lot of Chelsea fans think it's unfortunate. The fact is, the last purchase that they made was Romelu Lukaku, who is a fan service club signing and
Yeah,
made absolutely no sense. They wanted Holland last season, but they found out it would cost 150 million plus agents' fees plus X, Y, and Z. Rest in peace,
yeah.
Mino Raiola. I don't like Mino Raiola, but rest in peace, man. Like I don't. I'm not that petty. And so it would have costed them upwards of 200 million, British
Yeah,
pounds.
yeah,
So,
of course.
and
And
it's just kind of irony that would have been their last signing.
it was, and as you say, it came along with the Romelu Lukaku signing again, another massive marquee signing, £100 million. Big statement when it comes to purchasing a player, within this league. But it also came without, in my opinion, it was almost like everything was forgotten about how poor he had actually been the last time he was a big signing here in the Premier League at Manchester United. And it was almost a question of what's changed. Like, if sometimes it's just horses for courses, isn't there? Some players will never suit the Premier League, but they will look fantastic in another league. And Lukaku was one of those players. And it kind of went down to a case of following the trend, follow who's the hot player at the moment, and we'll go and sign that player. And that's what happened. I wasn't expecting him to do as badly as he has. I thought he would be bang average. That was my opinion. I thought it'd be about maybe 15, 16 goals across all competitions, probably bag a couple of goals, mainly not winning goals, but against teams he probably should score against. But unfortunately, he's turned out to become a player who, hasn't really worked out there. So I think you're right. I think moving the way that Roman Abramovich left was not expected for anybody. However, it did leave a bit of a question for future ownerships, do you not think, Jesse, as to how risky it can be when a club is owned by somebody who may well have potential links to some, say, on a political stage at the very least.
Yeah, let's just pull it back real quick because we have something that I think is very interesting here. Ironically, as United, we pulled punches. United fans, we pulled punches when it came to Romelu Lukaku coming back because he did so well in Italy, and so there's no reason for us to get our powder wet, so to speak, before comes back in and shows us what happened. He wanted to stay in Italy. That's a major factor. He looked great when he came back. He never had that fitness level at United, but he still failed at United. And this is where I think I just want to pull it back because I think this is an interesting point here from Jamie, who is their best striker since 2017. And to be honest, out of that list, there's only two answers, Abraham and Giroud. Abraham from the academy scored enough goals that you would consider him worthy of at least being in the conversation. But the fact is, Giroud is actually their best striker for the past, whoever knows how long, since Costa, really. So,
yeah, 100%.
Making massive mistakes in the market and selling off. I mean, Giroud was being aged out, but even now, winning titles with AC Milan. So it's hard to say. But then what was it? We're moving into state ownership. Clubs that choose to go along that route. I think that we all in our time want a state-owned club, whether they're an oligarch, like I said at the beginning, or someone who literally runs a country. You can say that it's the royal whatever Saudi royal investment fund, but the fact is it's a crown prince that's backed by, first off, the state of Saudi Arabia and his family, that's worth $2 trillion, sorry, excuse me, $2 trillion US dollars, I think is what they're actually worth. But I think it's short-sighted because at the end of the day, these institutions that are backed by countries end up finding themselves in a really, really precarious situation because they're owned by states that are guaranteed to have mud dug up on them someday. So I think it's a very short-sighted solution, and there's no real longevity in it. Of course, I'd love one of these institutions to come in and take over someone like Manchester United, but even the Glazers probably are a better long-term solution. So it's a little confusing. I don't know what you think about that, but
it's the risk that comes with it, doesn't it? Links with Russia. there's no surprise that at some point diplomatic tensions between the West and Russia would raise again. They always have done since the end of World War II. This is the way it's always been. There's been Cold Wars. There's been, warming of the truces together after the 90s, and everyone kind of got back together. The end of the Soviet Union, and they embraced again. However, when you have a nation that's run the way that Russia's been run and the way it's been going on, with the things that happened in 2014 in Crimea, the sanctions that happened there, and with the way that Russia's ran, that owners like Roman Abramovich, because of their previous histories with their links to how they gain their fortunes, and we won't go into that, but it does pose a inherent risk that if the West and that nation go into some form of diplomatic tension, that these people will come under some form of external pressure and some sort of governmental pressure. And that's what happened here. And I think the same goes with Manchester City, and I think the same goes with Saudi Arabia, is that as it stands now, those nations are an ally. They are a friend of the West. But they also have a number of things which fly in the face of Western ideals and the way that Western nations like Britain, the West, and the United States would like things to be done, and eventually things could cause a problem. It could be 10 years, it could be 5, it could be 25, it could be 50. However, this is where the risk comes in, and just as I think Jesse's made a mention there, City and Newcastle can't still be laughing. It'll be their turn if the government, the Premier League fit and proper ownership test has anything to say about it. And it's good that you mentioned that, Jamie, because Saudi Arabia, the People's Investment Fund, which purchased Newcastle, it took 18 months because of the fit and proper test that was brought in by the Premier League to try and ensure that the correct kind of owners are coming into clubs. Now, this happened prior to everything that happened over in Russia and the Ukraine as it stands now. So that, I think, will change again. I think the parameters will change once again and will be accelerated potentially 5 to 10 years further down the line to make it so that there could potentially come a day where there can be no state ownership, there can be no links to state issues, that they have to be completely independent owners. They need to be private citizens, as we would say. As Jesse says, the Glazers or FSG, those are a private company, and they can be dealt with in a much more straightforward way with one running the company. So we'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, it is interesting, and we'll just have to wait and see how that goes, really. But I think it's something to keep an eye on, especially for those clubs, because the scrutiny will be much higher now. I think the scrutiny is going to be a lot higher on these clubs because of these situations. So I don't know what you think about that, Jesse.
No, essentially just bringing it back real quick. A lot of the reason why the Saudis weren't initially allowed to take over Newcastle, a lot of the proper fit, what is it?
The fit and proper test, yeah.
Fit and proper test was that they were pirating off of BN Sports, which is a Qatar owned.
It's a sports TV channel, yeah.
Exactly, yeah, and I know we all know about that, but yeah, it was their channel, and so they're pirating off of it. So there was, I think it costed them somewhere and this is all alleged, this is all me, this is all hearsay, I can't remember, but I just want to point this out. I think it costed them billions of dollars alone to make that go away, to essentially say, okay, we won't pirate off your TV channel anymore. We will go ahead and set up our own, or just not set up one at all. And that was a major it was a major reason why they were able to actually take over Newcastle. And it makes sense because at the end of the day, Newcastle was what, 300 million, essentially give 20 to 30 million. I think that's what they bought them for.
Yeah.
So just bringing that up. Moving on to Boehly, if you're good with that, Dan.
Absolutely.
I think that this could spell. Look, what Abramovich did for Chelsea was they built a global fan base. They gave them a lot more means because Chelsea was a big club, but they were a big club in England, in the UK, and he moved them along and he put them on the global stage. Now Chelsea has money. They do have revenue. They're in a difficult position right now. They've had weird little things, transfer bans most recently, and that was under Abramovich and whatnot. But the fact is, Boehly spends money. Boehly spends money, and he spends it pretty frivolously, but he also spends it well. His teams aren't always the best, but he does make some financially good decisions. I'm taking this from the Lakers and the Dodgers. Essentially, the Dodgers just shell out money. They cap out contracts because in America, contracts are capped. Mbappe doesn't happen in America. It's not allowed to happen. Even in the MLS, I think the rule is you're capped at all of your players. You're allowed to you have a salary cap for all your players except for 3. So you're allowed to go above and beyond if you want a Zlatan Ibrahimovic, a Beckham, whomever it may be, right?
Yeah.
So you're allowed to go over that if you have the money to spend. And that's kind of the way that Boehly's always done things in MLB, in Major League Baseball. That entire team is just capped at the maximum salary that you're allowed to do. What up, Annie? Evening, man. And then the Lakers, look at what they're doing with Anthony and LeBron. So I do think that they're going to spend, and I think if they know what's good for them, I honestly do believe that they'll try at their very best to follow the FSG model. What do you think as far as that goes, Dan? Because will they be able to replicate that? The fact is, in order to have those data models, it takes a long time, and that's what history. That's the evidence that history has presented us. So
with the data-driven models that FSG have implied and have put into their baseball teams, they put it into their NASCAR team. They're currently trying to purchase the Pittsburgh Penguins. They're a serial sports ownership company. That's all they deal with, just sports. And this is something that they've been doing for, coming 20 years now. They've been working in this sort of atmosphere now, coming up to 2 decades. They're still working to get it right. I think it's a constant, ongoing, developing situation that once this format's brought in, that they get the right people in, they get the right analysts, they have the right manager, they have the right directors of football. And it's so easy to say that this is the model we want to do, because I'm sure every club would like to do this, because if you look at the way that it's ran, they don't spend as much money as other clubs. They're able to be more successful with the purchases. And the most important, their hit rate is incredibly high. They have very few duds. Very few players don't land unless it's something that the data model can't predict, when it comes to potentially, unforeseen injuries, just downright bad luck. Situations like that is genuinely the only thing that they can't really predict. One of the case in points is a player like Diogo Jota. Not one person had his name on anyone's lips to come and play at a top 6 club. He was a decent enough player who played at Wolves. And all of a sudden, he's got himself into the top 4 goal scorers, top 5 goal scorers this season, and has been until Diaz came in. I think Diaz has settled him, but however, Diaz came in and he was brilliant. And Mane had to move to the middle. Diogo Jota then had to step up to the bench. And there was a little bit of an issue there, but it worked. So if Chelsea and Todd Boehly is able to replicate even in some way what FSG is doing, I think they'll be successful. I think they'll be a lot more consistent. I don't think they'll waste as much money as they have done in the past when it comes to purchasing players which aren't going to work. It's quite frightening, actually, when you hear owners who look at a model and go, we like that, because I know it works at my club. I know that's what's brought success to Liverpool. So I don't think any ownership now really is able just to throw money around without some form of real nous behind, because we've seen so many clubs make poor purchases. Manchester United is a case in point. It hasn't worked. You've had, I genuinely can't think, other than say Ronaldo, who was at least a shining light this season. Transfers for United have been poor almost every year, and I think that's down to there was no data-driven model that was run at United. It was basically done by eye. I think it was done all based on someone's opinion, and they've said, yeah, this player's good. Then they've gone to somebody else and said, yeah, he's good. Yeah, he looks really good. And then they've paid the money, and it's not been the right way to do things. And this is the future. I think this is the way things are going. So I think they've got a good chance because he's also a serial sports owner. He knows how to run sports franchises, and he's got two of the biggest in America, and he's adding one of the biggest in the UK to his portfolio, and he will want it to succeed.
Yeah, 100%. I just want to bring this up because I don't even know if Twisted here, but the fact is, evening guys, where's the 4.5 billion actually going? Well, it's not going into transfers. It's not going into infrastructure. It's purely a purchase option. A lot of what is going on at Chelsea this year, and I think it's been said by the ownership already, is that they're going to continue on with Marina Abramovich and Petr Cech's are the plans they already had. So I think you'll see a lot of Koundé. Koundé will come in. I think you'll see a lot of the previous mentions of transfers coming in. So it's not going to be towards revamping Stamford Bridge. Not only is Stamford Bridge old, but there's potential to move. I know Chelsea fans don't want that, and I don't think it will happen because Chelsea fans actually own the stadium, from my understanding, between the supporting trust and the actual fan base. They've done really well to keep a hold of that, and that's why Abramovich wasn't able to move previously. But I don't think, I mean, I know for a fact that the money's not going back into the club. What they're going to do is they're going to take the net profits from this year, which they lost a lot of over the course of the last 2 months, and they're going to try to invest that. So you're going to get Koundé, and you might see a Koundé and then a couple other transfers, but then they'll take that 20 million, and we'll get into this later, but 20 million from Lukaku, which I think will happen, and they'll work their way around it, and the new owners will want to spend big, but it's not going to be on infrastructure. It's going to be on players, and none of the money from the purchase of the club is going to go back into that. And then the other one, what barometer will be used to measure success under the Boehly's? Totally different philosophy to the previous owner. Absolutely. And that's kind of where we're getting to. The barometer that will measure success under the Boehly's will only be seen in a year or two. The problem with ownership, it's not like having a new coach. So Ten Hag can get in as a dream. As a dream. This would be like the best summer we've ever had. This would be a 10 out of 10. Neves, we could get in Frenkie de Jong, Nunez, we could get in Timber and Torres, and I would expect immediate results if we were to have a perfect 10 out of 10 summer. But with ownership, it doesn't work that way. So what can we really expect? How can you measure success? I think we see in 2 years, because like I just said, I think that they have to follow the agenda of the last regime before they can instill what they want. Going back to Dan said something earlier about data-driven models. United just promoted our data analyst, our director of data, last autumn. So like even United is not on this, and even United, I shouldn't say that because we're never on anything. But the fact is, like there are big clubs who don't use these models. And previously, if we go back to kind of like the Moneyball meta, the fact is Liverpool does it best, but they've been doing it in Major League Baseball since the 90s and early noughties. United's not even using that yet. There's a lot of European clubs who are way behind what America does in this way. And Liverpool really is needed because they're the ones who came in, and a lot of the German clubs as well, I should mention, are the ones who have shown you can spend a quarter of the money to get the same results. You don't need a big hitter, but you need to replace the numbers. So,
and that's it. That's exactly what it's about, isn't it? It's when it was brought up about Salah potentially leaving the club and saying, well, how will we replace his 40 goals a season? You don't need to get one player who can replace his 40 goals and assists in a season. You can purchase a couple. You can buy 2 or 3. It's not just a case of, you can't replace him. No, of course not. You can't replace the irreplaceable, but what you can do and to quote the film, is to replicate them in the aggregate. That's exactly what they do. That's the problem that the A's, the baseball team, who was originally implemented this sort of model that was to come in, was to sit there and say, we can't replace this guy, but what we can do is replicate him. And that's what they need to do. They'll need to look at the situation that's going on. They'll be getting the right people involved at this point into the club, I'm sure. Transfers at the moment, we'll definitely go on to that in a little bit, but as it stands now, the club that they have, I believe they'll just go with the transfers that they originally had. I think they'll want a more seamless sort of model where they can go, yeah, that's that transfer window, and then we can then put our work in place ready for next season to start making the studies, start putting the analysts in, get the people in the back room to make the right decisions. And it's quite interesting actually mentioning Marina. The Daily Mail, to quote the Daily Mail, they have put an article out on the 1st of June, which is stating that there is talks of Marina leaving the club at the end of August, once the transfer window is closed. And as it stands now, and the director of football from Atletico Madrid is tipped as the favourite to come in and take over that job. I don't know enough about that guy, to be fair. It just goes to show that as it stands now, the Boehly's are coming in and trying to clear house. That Marina has done a fantastic job. She's been a loyal servant to Chelsea, and she's more than capable of doing the job that she can do at that club. However, I think it goes to show, if that does happen, that they're looking to remove any trace of Roman Abramovich and any links that there were there in the past, to take the club into their ownership, and all decisions are made from their point of view. Just before we move on, I'll just twist its comment there. Would the can't seem to bring it up. Oh, there it is. Would the FSG model bring success to every club if implemented? Tough to say. If you get the right people, then the model will work. That's the situation, is that you need to have the right manager, the right directors of football, and then you need the right analysts who are all able to work together. They all need to work in the same principle, that everyone believes in the philosophy that is put in place, that the trust is there, that when the data analysts are coming into their meetings, and this is what will more than likely happen, they'll have a big meeting, and then there'll be a list of players. They will be asked by the manager, asked by the scouts to look for a particular player. They'll say, we're looking for a striker, for example, and they'll have some parameters to look for. We need someone who can finish chances from crosses, or a player who can do this or who can do that. And then what will go away is the analysts will then go and look for players and apply that player's data into the Liverpool model, and outcomes a potential expected outcome from certain players. The Athletic has done some brilliant pieces on this. They did one actually with, I'll say, Diogo Jota, because he shocked everybody as to how successful he was. And one of the most interesting points from him is that he scored half a goal from every chance that he has in the box. So for every 2 chances that he had in the 18-yard box, he scored. And it also worked that he also had a perfect 50-50 between his right foot finishing and his left foot finishing. So that kind of data, if put in the right place, can absolutely work. And the FSG model is proven to be successful. However, I don't think every club can implement it. I don't think it's possible that everyone can do this. It's something that needs the right owners, the right people involved from the start. So yeah, that's what's the interesting one for me. It's great to say that's what we want to do, but it's another thing saying that you can actually do it. Just over to you, Jesse. What do you reckon, mate?
Yeah. Massive issue with the data analyst sort of idea is you don't just need the right DOF. I don't know about this guy from Atletico Madrid. Honestly, their recruitment has been shocking. So I would hope, if as a Chelsea fan, I would hope you go in and get someone like Paul Mitchell. I'll just say that right off the bat. I think get the right people in at the right time. I'm still disappointed we got Andy O'Boyle or whatever it is at United. I think he'll do well. A lot of really good DOFs come from the position he had with the FA. but I would have gone for Paul Mitchell just personally, and they might still end up with him. Only time will tell. Now, as far as the data analyst thing goes, getting the right DOF, having the right coach. Tuchel is an amazing manager. Cool. Okay. Having the right coach, having the right DOF, which I believe is Paul Mitchell, and then having the right data analysts, constructing that department in a very efficient way is the third piece. You can't have none of the pieces can be out of sort. So I think it's just important to point out it's not just having data analysts. I think people think, I mean, I work with data. So does Neil in our Discord chat and in our WhatsApp chat. He could back me up here. It's so important to have the correct people looking at data. Data seems simple. It's like, well, 1 + 1 = 2, duh. But when you have terabytes of data, heart rate, recovery rate, running speed, ground covered, heat maps, all of this needs to be understood. You can't bring in someone from an NFL team or from a cricket team or a rugby team into study football. You have to understand the sport down to the T and then apply data. So it sounds all great. Oh, well, we have a data model now. But the fact is you need the right people running that data model. And I actually have faith, just real quick, I actually have faith in Boehly to get that right. I think he will shop around. He'll shop around Opta and say, who can give me the best, the most accurate statistics on this, on these assessments of players and purchases and then there's the other side of scouting, which obviously is your personality and yada yada, X, Y, and Z. But I'm just saying, there's more to it than that. Go ahead, Dan. Yeah.
No. So I'm just to echo your points. There's an exceptional level of trust that has to be placed into the data analysts as well, because these are very, very, very expensive assets that are being purchased by the club. That when they are having these discussions and they're presenting this data and information, that they'll come to them with players that maybe potentially that they hadn't seen, or potentially players that they may, as football people, this is something that's important within the scouting network, within the management, within the coaching. A lot of this in the last 130 odd years has been done by the eye. It's been literally the eye test, that they'll look at a player and see how they do, how they run, how they pass, how they press, how they, their attitude on the pitch. It's all been done on a personal opinion. And that has worked, of course. It's worked on a number of occasions, but on many occasions, it hasn't worked. It's not worked out to be the right kind of player, whether that's a personality issue, whether that's a physical issue, whether that's a chemistry within the team, working well with other players, whether they fit the system in the right way. But my point being is that these guys know what they're talking about. So I'm going to use Jurgen Klopp as an example, a man who's grown up as a professional footballer, been a coach, been a manager, done all of these things. He's been to university to study sports science. This man knows what he's talking about. And what you're now going to get is technically, and more than likely, someone who has actually never stepped foot on a football pitch, even at an amateur or semi-professional level, coming to these people and saying, based on the information that we have, these players would fit your system, and here is why. And that's where the trust comes in, to actually trust these guys that they're going to come in and say, this player. And then they have to then get over their preconceptions, potentially, of the way that they have this player, and look and go, I'm going to trust what you say. I'm going to trust that you know enough that if you're telling, we've asked you to do this, you have looked at the way we play, you've looked at how they play, and you're telling us that you expect this player to have this level of output. And it takes time to build this trust between either the independent company that you use to give you your data or your in-house team. There is questions as to whether or not an in-house team could be more influenced than an external team, an independent team who would be able to just go, our job, you have tasked us to collect data and present a presentation based on the information that we have collated. So that would be a question for the Bowleys as to whether or not they want to have an in-house team or whether they want to actually get an independent company to go and do this work for them in the background. So there's a lot, as Jesse said, that needs to be set up, and it will take years. It genuinely will take years before they're able to get the right people. There'll be trial and error. They'll have one company that might not work. It might work perfectly, but these are all things that will rotate and change around. So we'll have to wait and see. But I think this is a good opportunity for us to talk about the transfers that are coming up.
Let's cover a couple of things first. I have one question for you, but I also want to go ahead and bring up Twisted here. How robust is the data model when assessing a player's mentality before considering a potential purchase? That's exactly what I was saying. That's the misnomer. That's the one where you need. This is what Sir Alex Ferguson was amazing at, was knowing the player's mentality before it came to any other factor. At that time in history, we were very fortunate that there wasn't a Liverpool, there wasn't an FSG, John Henry, Edwards coming in and who had that advantage as far as data goes. But then I also just want to ask Dan before we move on to transfers about I assume you guys have your own data department?
Yeah, there's an in-house, and then there's also, from what I've read through the Athletic, there's also external companies which are brought in for particular projects.
Okay.
They've got the right people they want at the moment, but then they also work with a number of other things. This is what Liverpool are very, very good at. They are very good at bringing in cutting-edge data, new techniques. Using AI, using companies like Neuro 8, who have currently been working on mental strength training for the players when it comes to set piece routines. And they've paid off this season. But again, this sounds great. But if you're the first person to do it, it's a lot of money for a club to invest in something that is potentially unproven. It'll be completely unproven. And that is why it will potentially take time. It will take years before you can see this. You can see this progress, because when FSG first came in at Liverpool, they had a number of very poor purchases because they were done off the eye. They learned very quickly that they allowed managers and trusted managers based on their opinion, but then they quickly realised that that is a hit and miss situation. If you are wasting money on players who don't end up working out, it's worth spending that money off the pitch in trying to get the best bet, trying to get all the information ahead before you place your money on the table and say, yes, we'll pay 45, 50, 60 million pounds for a particular player. We need to know as best as we possibly can that this player will come in and work. I think that's what FSG have evolved, because the way that Liverpool is ran now is very different to the way Liverpool was run 6-7 years ago. Even though FSG had been running a data-driven model under the Major League Baseball for a lot longer before then. You'd have thought it had been implemented immediately, and I'm sure that probably was the intention. But even then, they realised that you can't just move the people across from Major League Baseball and then make them football analysts. It doesn't quite work that way. You need to get the right people from the start. So, yeah, considering the mental, assessing a player mentally, you're totally right. It's one of the unknown variables at the end of the day, and that does come down to the eye and understanding of players' mentality. It's numbers don't care about people, do they? That's the thing.
No, they really don't. And that's where we start getting into kind of the more transfer topic, which is what players do they bring in. We're a little stranglehold on this, viewers, because the fact is the funds have been frozen for so long. The last 2 months of Chelsea's season, they weren't able to basically make a dime, which I would say is criminal, but so is the way that we're taking over. So just being honest. So it's something that there's not a whole lot to, but the fact is, I think we will see much more coming out of the Chelsea camp here in the next week or two. I think you'll start seeing them really pursuing players. I'm gonna keep it to the ones that we know that are they're gonna happen. Koundé
is very, very likely. Yes, and that's been no no secret, has it, at the end of the day in football? It's been no secret that they want Kunde.
Worst kept secret. Yeah. And then just to add on to that they're going to be, like I said earlier, they're going to be chasing the same sort of players that they were already intending to do, which hence why when Dan said Marina will leave in autumn, she'll leave in the fall. That's the sort of thing. They're going to keep that agenda rolling. So Kunde, clear as day, worst kept secret. Yeah.
Yeah, and another transfer that's currently being quite heavily linked, which is Ousmane Dembele, because of Barcelona's current situation with finances. That they have a number of players that they can't register to play for the team as it stands due to financial fair play. And that kind of signing for me sounds very Chelsea. It does. It sounds like the kind of player that they would go for under Abramovich. The side of it which is interesting, really, is it all seems quite. I don't know the right word is. It still seems a bit quiet because the news that was coming out was they were going to spend £200 million, and to spend £200 million, they need to get a move on. They genuinely need to start making some moves, start happening, and the news that's coming out has been pretty slow. Kunde, I thought, would have been wrapped up almost immediately. I thought that would be something which they'd have had done very, very quickly. It's a case of paying the release clause, and I believe personal terms had already been agreed a lot longer ago from last season. So whether or not Sevilla selling Diego Carlos has had any form of impact on that deal, as to whether or not there was initial sort of considerations to taking less than the release clause prior to that sale. We'll just have to wait and see on that one. Again, with Ousmane Dembele, that's meant to be a free transfer. There's a lot of kind of ifs and buts at the moment, because with Barcelona, it's all based on they need to balance their books. They want to bring new players in, but they also have to sell players. And as it stands now, I can't gauge how Chelsea's transfer window is going to go. For me, in the past, you'd have just said it was much easier under Abramovich to get these deals done. And with the Boehleys, it's an unknown entity as to how they will do their business, whether or not they will seek to negotiate hard, whether they will just say, right, let's just get these players in, let's pay the money and just, kind of get the ball rolling and kind of have a good start with the fans. I'm sure they'll want a good start with the fans, but it's that balancing act between making good business decisions and also ensuring that they get the fans on side, because that first successful window will be really important, because there's a lot of Chelsea fans who I'm sure are quite apprehensive as to how the ownership of the club will go from here on in, really.
Yeah. I think the irony almost comes. Ousmane Dembele. I think he can do some really great things at Chelsea. He's very injury prone, but the fact is, the reason why he's going on a free is because he had such high wages, had a bad attitude issue, and so if do they really want to start off on that foot? I'd be happy as a United fan to see Chelsea start off on that foot. I'm not sure that's the right transfer. I think he's an amazing player, by the way, and he could tear it up if he signs. He could tear it up. But the fact is, this is the issue at Barcelona right now, and I just found this out today because previously players, Usman, I don't know how much Dembele was actually on, but he was on some ridiculous waves because that's what Barcelona's been doing.
Yeah.
Recently, but then even now, I'm looking at Frenkie de Jong because a lot of people are kind of jaded about this. So he was on 164 million pounds a week. He is currently
164,000.
164,000, which is a steal because he came from Ajax, and he is elite. But as this is posted March 18th, he earns $350,000 a week, so somewhere around
275, something like that, isn't it?
Exactly. So he got a pay bump. There are a lot of these players coming out of Barcelona, and this is why Barcelona is trying to sell them, because they're trying to open up their wage bill. Because the fact is, they had Griezmann on something like
600,000, wasn't it?
It was like it was like 640,000 euros a week for Griezmann, which Griezmann's a great player, but that's outrageous, man. That's absolutely it boggles the mind that you could
As
pay
to
that
how
much.
that was ever going to be a good deal. Well, that would make sense in any way, shape, or form. It was they basically did a Leeds, didn't they, on a much bigger scale, and went, yeah, all the money's gone. I'm afraid now they're in a situation where they've got 1.5 billion of debt, and they're currently scrambling to try and encourage players to leave the clubs. But this is where the problem therein lies: is that if the right deal doesn't come along for Frankie De Jong, he will want his wages. That's the thing that people need to understand, and it works both ways. When a player wants to go to another club and they want bigger wages, everyone seems to have no problem with this. Oh well, Salah could move to PSG and get 500 grand a week, or he could go here and do that. And then when the argument comes up and says, well, maybe that doesn't make sense. Maybe they don't need to go and sign for those wages because they can't fulfill their ambitions at a certain club. They won't be able to do the things that they want to do. They want to win Champions Leagues or win leagues or want to play in the Premier League or want to play in La Liga. These are all the variables which aren't within the wage structure. And with some players, for example, Adama Traore is on £10,000 a week because he wanted to play at Barcelona. Some players will take hits if they want to go to the right club, if it's something that's so important to them to be able to wear the famous, blue and red kit at the end of the day at Barcelona and play at the new camp and, to be a Barcelona player. So it also works the other way, that when that player doesn't work out and is on a 4 or 5 year deal and is on £350,000 a week, they don't have to leave. It's as simple as that. They have no reason to leave. They could quite happily sit there and say, no, I'll leave if I get £350,000 at, say, Manchester United or at Chelsea. But then that makes it difficult because there's more than likely they'll go, no, we're not going to pay that kind of money. And that lies into one of the current players that they have at the moment in Romelu Lukaku, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, majorly. I think he's on 325K a week. And he's not pulling his weight, so to speak. No. He's not pulling his weight. And the fact is, they do very well to clear him out, have him go on loan, drop that price. I think the rumor is 20 million for the loan and then 60 million for a buyout clause at the end of that loan. I would drop that down to 50K and make it an obligation to buy, because they do want to buy him. So I would do everything I could to open up those the actual salary there.
I think this is where they're going to come up some real difficulties, because we've spoken on a couple of our streams on the Lounge episodes, and I'm not convinced in any way, shape, or form that this is a buyer's market for Romelu Lukaku. It's not on Chelsea. They will have to take, in my opinion, whatever is on the table. If Inter Milan put a deal in there that they say, well, we won't agree to an obligation to buy, it may well come down to that. It may well mean that they'll have to just take him off the wage bill for this season and hope upon hope that he has an incredible season, and then they have no reason but not to purchase him. But an obligation to buy at £20 million as a loan fee up front, is that what's being quoted?
Yeah, £20 million is what's being quoted.
20 million is a loan fee with an obligation at 60.
Not an obligation. There's no news about that. It's just there's going to be something in that contract that's.
But it would surprise me very much so if they didn't want some form of obligation to purchase within there. Right, Pav, how you doing, mate? That they would want some form of obligation to purchase. They want to sell the player at that point, but that's going to become very, very difficult. I think Inter Milan know that. I think Inter Milan know that they have the strong arm in the situation. The 20 million side is great, but I think they'll be more than happy to say, well, actually, we want it as an option, just as an option to purchase. We don't want to kind of hold any cards. £325,000 a week. Is he going? Will he take that pay cut? That's a big question. Will he go down and we'll take those? It becomes really difficult when it comes to those situations. So we'll have to see how the Lukaku saga sort of pans out, because that is the first big problem, or the first big test of the Boehly ownership, as to how they manage this negotiation, as to how they're able to move him along, because he does need to be sold. He does, but the problem is who do you sell him to?
So that's the funny thing. Who fulfills the wages as well? 320 million pounds. I mean, what are we talking about? 360 million euros, just about. And you're
325,000.
there you go. And so you're asking a club who already has issues with their finances wanting this player back, hence why they need the loan before they can justify actually making the flat out purchase. Who's going to fulfill a salary? And the fact is, it's going to be split 50-50. I can almost guarantee that. Moving on from that, the reason why they need to do it is not just because Lukaku's not a good fit for Chelsea.
Yeah.
But because they need to move on 4 or 5 attacking players. Now they're not getting rid of Pulisic, even though he needs to move on. As an American, love him to death, but he needs to go. He's injury prone. He doesn't belong at one of the Premier League's best teams. He just doesn't belong there. Lukaku obviously needs to go. Then you have Werner, who he's a utility player. And for one of the top sides, when you're getting rid of your top striker, who's meant to be your top striker, at least, allegedly, you need to get rid of him. Ziyech isn't good enough. I mean, he's great. He's a very good player. Ziyech is a very good player, but he doesn't belong in the Tuchel system. They bought him kind of ad hoc before
for the Lampard system that they brought him in, and again, he was hot. He was hot stuff though, wasn't he? He was a hot stuff kind of buy at Ajax. He was a player who was, really lighting things up, playing these, top quality passes and doing really well. And just before we move on to that, I just want to say thank you for everyone who's currently watching. We've got 4 viewers. We just went up to 6. I really appreciate your time and you coming in. Thank you for all your comments. And if you could stick a like on the video, I would really, really appreciate it. We're just trying to, create something that's entertaining for you, but we really do appreciate you spending your time with us. So, so I think the Lukaku situation is a really interesting one. I think that is the first real test. I'm not sure it gets done quickly, in all honesty. I'm not sure if it gets done quickly, but we'll have to see how desperate Inter Milan are, and it might come down to whether or not they end up selling Lautaro Martinez.
I think he just said he wanted to stay.
There you go. So he wants to remain.
That's about Unfortunately, that's what's going to happen, and I think that will be even more of an attraction to Lukaku with Twisted here. If Lukaku scored 20 goals in the Prem this season, would it have changed their final position in the table?
It depends what games he scored them in.
But it certainly, how many match winners they had or he had. But on the other side of things, it certainly would have pushed them up the table.
Oh yeah, they probably would have won more games and drawn them if he was the man that they expected. I think that's where they really lacked. So it's interesting. There's a number of players that still do need to be moved on from the club. A lot of players on very high wages and are not delivering. Like you said, Timo Werner, £272,000 a week it's an enormous amount of money for the kind of output that this player is able to do. How do you see their transfer window going? Do you think they'll get their targets?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry.
I'm just wondering, how do you think that Chelsea's transfer window goes? Do you think that they'll have the successes that they're used to in the transfer market?
I honestly, I think it's a very tenuous situation. I think Chelsea are going to go into this market with high expectations. They're going to overhype their transfer. Essentially their mission here is to get a marquee signing, get rid of Lukaku, get rid of the players we just mentioned, because in attack, they need to do so. And at the end of the day, they're going to need to essentially what they're going to need to do is get a marquee signing and try to fill in positions that I'm not sure they can fill in. I'm not sure whether they have the finances. I think they need a lot in defense, which is the irony, because they need to sell off a bunch of strikers, replace those strikers, and then get in defenders, which is why I think Pulisic is going to be safe.
Yeah,
that's the reason why I think he's going to be safe. I think players like Timo Werner might be safe. I know Christian is going to be safe, but I also think that Werner, one of Werner and Ziyech is going to be safe because they need so many defenders. It's not even funny. I know Chalobah has done well, but he's not going to replace a starting center back.
No.
Losing Christensen, I never rated him that much. I rate him like I rate Lindelof. He's a good player. He's good on the ball, but he's soft, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Losing, I keeping Thiago Silva. He's too old. So bringing in Koundé is not going to be good enough. I actually think United's going to do big things. I think that they might go ahead and get Pau Torres. I really do, because I think they need center backs more than we do, because at least we have the personnel in defense.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you have enough numbers, don't you? At the end of the day, as you say, they have enough numbers at United to get by. But with Chelsea, they've lost Rudiger. He's gone. Christensen's gone. Alonso, I believe, is going. Cesar Azpilicueta is going. They're lacking in a number of positions. I believe they do need two centre backs. I think they need two. You're probably going to get one, and that makes sense. But they need two, don't they? They do need two top centre backs, and as it stands now, it's really going to be a seller's market in the centre back situation.
Watch your yourself.
It's really going to be a seller's situation this summer when it comes to centre backs. There's a number of clubs here in the Premier League and further afield who are going to be looking for top quality centre backs to try and bridge gaps between fifth, sixth, and fourth and third, and trying to get into potentially a title race. And there isn't the numbers out there. And this has been highlighted as well with the currently available attackers. I think we're going through a big lack of quality players available in all positions, as they all seem to be tied down. There's no players who are kind of, oh, do you know what, they're free and that they're available to go to other clubs. So just on my personal opinion, when it comes to Chelsea, when it comes to transfers, I don't think they're going to do that well. I just have a feeling. And it's just, I think that they've come up against a difficulty of not being able to get any of these deals boxed off prior to the start of the season, at the end of the season. They've got 2 months now between now and the end of this. They've got 2 months between now and the start of next season. And they've also got 4 weeks until the beginning of pre-season. Most clubs want their business done before pre-season, so they can put the players into the team and get them working under the system that the coach and the manager wants. These next 4 weeks are going to be incredibly important, I think, for Chelsea, to bring certain players in to this club. And I thought Koundé would be done. If Koundé isn't done by next week, I'd start to be concerned as a Chelsea fan. I would start to be concerned that there is other teams at play here who are causing issues. I think, as Jesse's mentioned, I think other clubs could well be, sort of having discussions around certain players that they may also be targeting.
I fully expect Koundé to be done. Even if it's not next week, he will be done. And then they're going to want one more marquee signing before moving on to other targets. The issue I see, and the way that this window ends up in disappointment for Chelsea fans and for the club as a whole, is the fact that they were frozen out over the past 2 months, and they weren't really able to make really coherent moves for other targets in the market. Because what can I promise you? What can I promise you? We don't even have an owner. We don't have money. We don't even know if we're going to have this owner. Even if it's 80% clear, it's really hard to sell that project to someone, especially when you're talking to Marina from the previous regime, who is going to be taking over for a summer and not even going to be carrying on into the next project. You don't even know if Tuchel will be there. Now I think he will. I think he's a very good coach, but it does become an issue of, where are you going, and what am I signing up to? Same reason why United has had a really bad time signing up players recently. Now, Frenkie de Jong is only possible for Barcelona, and there's some comments in the chat that lead to this, but the only reason why he's possible is because of Ten Hag, because he already knows that Ten Hag knows how to play him, knows how to bring him in, and whatnot, and just right here, 50 to 60 million for Lewandowski. Frankie's gone. If those are the numbers being quoted, plus 400 grand in weekly wages, Frenkie de Jong's gone since the CBC appointment, or that deal broke down. I didn't realize that was with the league. So essentially what happened with Barcelona was that the CBC deals, I think it was 270 or something, and 720, and they were for imaging rights and for merchandising rights. And those were with the league in order to disperse money to other teams within the league.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that's going to happen. And honestly, I think at this point in time, going back to the initial point, the market is so unsaturated with talent that it's, for me, I don't even want Nunez. But the fact is, if Liverpool comes and gets Nunez from us, I'm going to be gutted, because guess what? We need a striker, and there's no top talent out there. This is probably the hardest market that we've had for going on 20 years.
It's the domino. It's the domino effect, isn't it? It's the scarcity of resources that are currently available. Then certain players at certain clubs either not leaving. Mbappe not leaving has had an effect on a number of different teams. Mbappe has affected Liverpool when it came for Tchouaméni. There's currently a talk of Real Madrid trying to spend 100 million euros on Tchouaméni, which is an outrageous sum. It genuinely is an outrageous sum of money for a player of his age and his position. 100 million euros is what you pay for number nines, for people who are going to score 20, 30, 35 goals a season in all competitions for your team, who's going to win games and put goals in the back of the net. This is the player that they're looking at. And that's caused issues for a number of clubs. Liverpool, having Sadio Mane lead the club in the way that he's requested to lead the club, has now caused issues for other clubs who want to purchase strikers, as Jesse's just said, that Liverpool are linked with Nunez. We're currently the favourites to sign Nunez, according to the bookmakers, at 5-2, 2.5-1. And I've sat, and me and Jesse have had chats before, and I've said it's a 50-50 for me. Because for me, I think he makes sense. But on the same token, I can see us not buying him. Because when it comes to Liverpool, you never know what we're doing. You never know what we're thinking. That's the interesting thing about us at times. We're able just to have our own cards in our own hand and be able to say, yeah, you're looking at Nunez, but we're looking at some fella who's currently playing for Braga. You know, it's that way it can be, really. And as you've said, there's a lack of good quality centre-backs available on the market from other clubs. There's a big lack of strikers and attacking options from out Europe. It's so limited as to what's available now, and it's going to go either going to go to the teams with the most money, or it's going to go to the teams in the best position. And the last thing you want to be doing is spending absolute fortunes on players, and that being the reason they choose your club over potentially choosing a club for footballing reasons. So what's this bit? Barcelona will play a big part in the Chelsea window. Lewandowski could join, Lukaku to Bayern, Barcelona or Inter, Alonso, Aspie to Barca. Yep. It's the domino effect. One signing affects another signing, affects another signing, affects another signing. And this is why the next big player to move, me and Jesse have discussed it about Sadio Mane, that we'll know because of the way that Liverpool have had their discussions, that if Mane agrees the deal to Bayern, the Liverpool's next striker will already be done. That's my opinion. I believe that's how it's going to go down. The Liverpool are working on getting the deal done for the new replacement, and then they will then agree the sale of Sadio Mane. And the Sadio Mane agreement will be released before Liverpool's announcement of their new signing. That's just how I see it going. I don't think we'll bring anybody in or confirm a player coming to the club before Sadio Mane's announcement of leaving happens. So that will be, for me, the next key to the attacking options of players. Lewandowski's signing, Mane's signing, going to different clubs will be that point. But it's the defensive side for me. Chelsea need a lot of defenders, a lot, and they need good quality defenders as well.
And then even in that market, it's not saturated enough. There's not. So like Timber is an Ajax player until next summer, unless it's United, and I think we'll get him. But the fact is, the only club that can take Timber from Ajax this summer is United, because he won't put in a transfer request. He'll have a lot of respect, but he'll have a lot of respect for Ajax, and he'll only come here because behind the scenes he'll say to the powers that be, hey, I want to move to United. Okay, let's make something happen. United will pay a little bit over the price. We'll pay something around 35 million pounds, which during our United stream, I said 25 million. That's how much he's worth at this moment. But they know that next summer he'll be worth 45, 50 million pounds. So
he has a great season, yeah.
Exactly, and it's he's pretty much guaranteed in the Eredivisie. I don't know what it would look like, given who comes in as coach and all that, but he's pretty
Yeah.
much guaranteed to. So he's not moving this summer, which is why we have a free run at him. Then what else are we looking at? We're looking at Koundé, who Chelsea has been courting for a year now, going on 12 months, really, since the beginning of last summer. So
Yeah.
they're pretty much set on getting him. Pau Torres, that's why I said I think they might go for Pau Torres and Koundé. I think we only go for one. I said the other day that I think we go for two, but I think Chelsea goes for one. This is only between two clubs, by the way. There's no one on the market. It's ridiculous. Koulibaly, people mention. Cool,
The
but
price tag that Napoli's setting on the man is an outrageous sum.
and he's 30 and he's amazing.
Yeah.
He's incredible. Really, when he was 27, 28, anyone in the world would have wanted him, but he was 100 million then, and that's not what people paid for center backs. It just wasn't. Van Dijk was the most expensive at that time, and he went for 30 million less. So just everyone got priced out of the market.
Yeah.
The market just isn't saturated.
There's not enough talent. There's not enough talent available for the buyers. So it's going to be a very, very interesting summer. I think it's going to be a chess match. I think it's about getting the right people in at the time. But just going to discuss Jamie's point there about, do you think Marina leaving Chelsea? As it stands with Marina leaving, from what I've read, it is allegedly. There's no confirmation. There's no announcement from the club. But it makes sense that this would happen. That she would finish her job this summer and then maybe go off into the sunset. Hurt them in the short term or the long term if they don't replace her well. I think both. I think absolutely both. If someone as good as Marina, the right director of football is incredibly important to any club. It's huge. Like, it used to be a position that was sort of invented, a bit of a quango, a bit of oh yeah, it sounds great to have somebody in, but their job is to allow the coach to do his job. The coach coaches the team, deals with the players, deals with the team. The director of football's job is to go out there and do all of those ancillary pieces, to do all of the bits and pieces in the background that mean that the club is run efficiently and run properly. And Liverpool have had directors of football that haven't worked. We've had Damien Comolli, who was from Tottenham. He didn't work. It wasn't great. It wasn't a right fit for us. We brought in Michael Edwards, and he has had, he's lauded worldwide as a guy who's able to sell. He's able to sell, snows. He's able to sell snow in the Antarctic. At the end of the day, he can sell a player who isn't worth anywhere near the cost to teams, and then he's able to purchase players, and they turn into gems. It's almost like he's untouchable. Julian Ward, who's been working for him for 4 or 5 years now, he's taking over and having the overrun, having someone come in who's been there, learned the job the Liverpool way, and having that sort of handing over of the reins being as smooth as it is, means there's less problems going on, further along down the way. So we'll have to see. It will be, if they get the right person, man or woman, in, it's looking potentially that it's going to be the gentleman from Atletico Madrid. Their signings have actually been really poor. They've not had some good buys. They've had some players who haven't quite worked out at Atletico Madrid. So we'll have to see. But for me, I think it will. Yeah, it's good, isn't it? Look at a bit of a classic flow. Yeah, Nintendo. I'm going to be trying to sport a couple of these retro ones for you. I'm going to make it a bit of a thing. I've got a few in the locker in the back, so I'll have a few decent ones on for you, boys. But yes, she's done a really good job. So yeah, I think it could well be.
I want to add on to this real quick.
No, carry on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be an incredibly difficult thing for Chelsea, because the fact is they have a very good manager right now. So do you want to marry up a DOF with the new regime of the ownership with the manager, or do you want to allow for the DOF to select the new manager? Because typically it goes the latter way. You want the DOF to create the structure along with the ownership and then bring in the right manager. So do you just make a compromise? Hey, look, Tuchel, you have 12 months to get on board with the way that we want to run this club. Or do we wait until we fire you, inevitably, or whatever it may be, and then bring in a DOF to select a new manager. Does that make sense? Like it's a really precarious place to be as far as Chelsea goes. So
no, 100%. I agree with you. And this is the thing: it's a partnership. The ownership, the director of football, and the coach, they all need to be holding hands at all times for it to work. There can't be any sort of butting of heads. They all need to be on the same page when it comes to running the club and the way that the club's going to go forward in the future. If they don't have, if the coach doesn't agree with the players that the director of football wants, that can cause problems. If there's butting of heads between the ownership and the manager, there's butting of heads between the director of football and the ownership, it can cause all sorts of issues. You need to have all people working together for the same cause, and that can be incredibly difficult. It can be really difficult to marry up these people, to get the right people all on the same page, all working towards the same goal. And that will be really, really interesting. There was talk about if I think Tuchel actually remained in a job, actually, because it's just a good point for us to bring it up, actually. Annie's has put up the Tuchel ban out. It's an interesting phase because we all look at Tuchel and we all think he's a great manager. I believe he's a fantastic manager. I've said a few times that for me, I think as it currently stands, he's a very, very good version of Rafa Benitez. He is a fantastic cup manager. In 90 minutes of football, when it comes to cup competitions, he can set up a team to do the business. As a league manager, it may not be his forte. He may not be his strongest point as it stands, but he's young. He has a long time to learn. And it's going to be interesting as to how long he's given at the club. If they're happy to give him 3-4 years run at it, if their short-term goals, I'm just going back to something that Twisted had mentioned in further, what does success look like in the first season for the Boehleys? Now, that's a tough question because I'm sure they're realists and appreciate what is success. Now, success will be remaining in the top 4 Premier League-wise. That will be the most important thing for Chelsea, is to maintain the status quo. I don't think they're going to be able to break in between City and Liverpool. I think that's going to be incredibly difficult. But what's important is they maintain their situations to where they are. If they're going to spend £200 million, there's no reason that they don't remain in the top 4. Genuinely, I don't see any reason why they don't remain top 4. If they don't get top 4 next season, Tuchel's job will be very, very much on the line for me.
Keep money in the club, keep things taking over.
Stay competitive
in all the right places. Otherwise, I'll be honest. So just real quick, then where do we see Tuchel in a year? Because I don't see him as Chelsea manager for more than 2 more years. Not because he's going to be a bad manager, but he'd have to do something majorly right, along with the ideas I already brought up about bringing in a new DOF. You almost need to restart. You need to start from ground zero. And part of the problem with starting from ground zero is getting rid of everyone. I mean, when you, I don't care if you're a business manager. I've had to do this with startups. I've seen it happen with churches when I was very young. I've seen it happen with basically every institution I've ever participated in. When someone takes over and the ownership switches, you have to erase everyone from top to bottom. It's nothing personal. It doesn't mean you're not the right person, but the ownership almost always needs to create a complete clean slate. And it's unfortunate, but it's something that needs to happen 99.9% of the time. I think that Tuchel will do well. And I think if I had to predict it, I think maybe they end up, leveling out and being okay. But the fact is, I can see a major switch coming soon. Like I can, and I think it needs to be a major clear out, if anything. So yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people who do need to be cleared out. Jesse, I was wondering whether or not you just thought it might be a good idea for us just to share the link if anyone wants to just to jump on and have a chat with us, if we can do that.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
If that's possible, we can just pop that in the comments section. So I'm just going to share the link, obviously, for everyone, currently the people who are watching. We do really appreciate your time, coming on and being so engaged in the chat here. So we're just going to put the link on there if anyone wants to come on and just share your thoughts, have a few questions, or just basically just get your point across of what we've been discussing. We'd love to hear your thoughts, guys. So yeah, we're just going to put that link now in the comments section. So So there's the link, and come and have your say, guys. So it's going to be really interesting because, as you've mentioned there, if they are going to be removing the director of football and bringing in their own person in, you could potentially say that the next person who does come under the chopping block potentially, it could well be the manager. It could well be that manager is not going to have the style of football and the style of play that they're going to establish at that club. It's if the ownership has gone, the director of football is gone, the only person who currently remains at the club is still the manager. It could potentially that they move on from him. Potentially, I think this season he goes nowhere. I think his job is safe if they maintain an even course. I don't think that they're. I think they understand. I think they would be naive to think that Chelsea will be able to next season to be able to bridge a 20-point gap. I think there's still going to be too much work to do. There's still going to be too many players to purchase and too many players to sell to make that gap close. I think they'll be expecting them to go well into the Champions League. I think they'll be looking for quarters potentially as a minimum again to get that cash rolling back into the club, because they are, unfortunately, at Chelsea, for them, if they want to admit it or not, they're at a little bit of a they've got a bungee cord wrapped around them at the moment. They've missed out on a lot of money. Those couple of months have cost a lot of money for Chelsea, and they need to re-rack that money back in. Is that the Boehly's are not here, the Boehly consortium's not here just to keep dumping money into the club. They will be expecting at some point to be able to invest that money in the places that they've agreed to invest it. That's within the women's team, within the stadium, within the off-field actions that Chelsea have to do. There's a lot of obligations that they'll need to fulfill, and the Bowleys won't want to keep pumping more and more money. They'll want it to become a self-sustaining operation, and that's where top four, doing well in the Champions League, is an absolute minimum for Thomas Tuchel. It's a question as to whether or not he remains the long term, but that will depend on the vision of the Bowleys ownership if they want to do that. So we'll have to wait and see, mate. So, Chelsea, it's an interesting one because I think they're at a crossroads. Jesse.
Yeah, and honest to God, I think that only time will tell. I mean, we started this off on a note where we think that. I mean, I think that, and I think you agree with me, that at the end of the day, they're going to have to move forward into the future. They had the most successful model since God knows. I mean, how do you overcome? How do you actually take over an empire like United in the vein of form we were in? We were winning leagues every year. We were making it to Champions League finals or Champions League semifinals and finals every other year, kind of around that time. And
winning domestic trophies,
winning basically everything we could. Sir Alex Ferguson retired with what is it, 46 or 48 trophies, more than anyone else in history of anyone, not just the Premier League, of anyone. So they needed a change of pace, and over the past decade and a half, they have started to slow down. It started great, but it started to slow down, and it started to lower near the end of it. So they needed a change of pace. And I don't know. Maybe this is a good time to bring in Jamie.
I was going to say, this is a good opportunity for us to bring in Jamie. So we've got Jamie on the show, mate. Jamie, how are you, mate? Welcome onto the show. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good, thanks, guys. How you doing?
Yeah, we're really good, thanks, mate. Thanks for coming on. So we're just wondering, what's your thoughts on Chelsea? How do you think they're going to go under the new ownership?
I think it's going to be a bit of a transitional period for them, mate, if I'm being honest. Like, I know probably, they've been doing a bit of planning, as clubs normally do around December, January, February time. But due to, the ownership issue, with obviously the club now being sold, and obviously I'm not going to get too deep into obviously the political side because we could be here for ages, but you know what I mean? It's gonna be a tough stretch. They definitely need to sign Jules Koundé, Josep Guardiola. Even though he's been at Leipzig for literally since last summer. Sorry, not
Yeah.
even last summer, 2 summers ago. He's another centre back that can play left back, left centre back. Depending on if Tuchel wants to, adapt, the 3-4-3 and play a back four.
Yeah.
I think as well, mate. Just to put on the point of Barcelona, I think they're gonna play a massive big say in
Huge.
Chelsea's future because, with obviously the I think it's the CVC thing with like obviously the rights they've been trying to sell and that obviously they've backed out of it now and them needing to, free up money in the wage bill and that, Lewandowski to Chelsea maybe, because let's face it, he might have his heart set on Barcelona, but if they can't get rid of players, he's kind of then stuck at Bayern any unless, another club comes in for him. So yeah, bro. I think overall it's going to be a bit of a transition for them, but I think they'll be okay. I just think it will literally just be a case of, Man City, Liverpool. Either one of them will swap places. Nothing will change really, and it's just literally between Chelsea, Spurs at this moment in time with the momentum of Conte and keeping Kane and getting Champions League football. You got United, who bit hit and miss, and Arsenal, we'll just have to wait and see in it. But I just think, top
I think you're
four and
right,
the trophy
Jamie.
for them.
I think you're right, Jamie. I think you hit the nail on the head there when it came to there's a number of key teams which hold all the cards here for some of these transfers that are going to affect Chelsea, but not just Chelsea, but a number of other clubs. But I think because where Chelsea is currently positioned with its requirements and the number of players it needs to bring in, I think they'll be the ones who could be the most affected by certain transfers going from certain clubs. So it'll be that domino effect as we've mentioned. So yeah, I totally agree with your points, and I think Jesse's got something to put on there.
Yeah. I think for Chelsea, the surprising thing is that, and obviously we repeat it many times, but the fact is that having that kind of sabbatical period with taking over the new management, unfortunately leaves them in a position where they're a month or two behind a lot of clubs chasing down these targets, so they have to start now. So even Nunez, who, if Liverpool wants to go in for him, is going to take him straight away from Manchester United. If Chelsea do want to slip in there, and Chelsea still need to offload Lukaku, that's not a done deal, and they need to offload him before they can then move into that sort of place. I think people sometimes don't understand that a massive part of this is having empty spaces. You guys, or not you guys, sorry, we don't have a Chelsea fan on here. Chelsea has an opportunity to go in immediately and sign 2-3 defenders because they don't need to offload anyone in defense. Now in attack, they need to move those players on before they can actually go into that market. And I think sometimes they overlook that. You can't buy Nunez without offloading Lukaku, but you can buy Pau Torres and Koundé right today if you put the money up, because you already need to fill those positions.
No, definitely, and I think that's the key point. But no, brilliant. So yeah, Jamie. So with that, is there any players that you have, in your opinion, that they may bring into the club?
Well, obviously Jospo Guardiola, who I've mentioned, being heavily linked with Chelsea. Tuchel's been, quite impressed of him from what reports are saying. Peter's kind of the centre back that Chelsea need. He's pretty powerful on the ball. He's quite a good tackler. Defensively, he is really sound. Maybe he could play like left fullback. Maybe I'm not really too sure on how his attacking output is like, but yeah, he's a proper good defender that I think Chelsea fans will probably like. As I've seen him play a lot of football in the Bundesliga. I think maybe midfield as well, because you guys have got to remember as well that, Jorginho and Kante, who have been familiar for Tuchel since he came into the club, they all need rotating, with both of them with the last year on their contract. Will Chelsea renew their contracts? Will they sell them on? Only time will tell. So, they'll probably need another body in that midfield, because for me, as good as Conor Gallagher is and Billy Gilmore, you just need a bit of experience instilled in that central midfield. That position, I'm not really too sure about, because, Ryan Gravenberch is obviously coming to Michael of Bayern, so that's another player that could have been in their midfield. I can't really think of many other midfielders they need, really. What do you guys think?
No, it's difficult, isn't it? This is where we've been racking our brains, to be honest with you, about who's the kind of players that Chelsea are going to be able to bring into the club. It's going to be a really interesting situation, but no, 100%. No, fantastic. So I think with that, Jamie, thanks very much for coming on, mate. We really appreciate, obviously, you coming on with your comments. We just put the link in there. If anyone else be able to jump on, we'd really appreciate you coming with your comments. Jamie, thanks very much for jumping on, mate, and just having your view. We really, really appreciate it, buddy.
No worries, mate.
No, 100%, mate, and we'll catch you on for the next one, buddy. Okay, mate.
Love you, buddy.
No worries, mate.
Nice one, bud. Take care, mate. Bye. Yeah, so it's going to be like Jamie's just mentioned there. There's so many questions about who's going to come in there, and that's I think the big conundrum as it stands now with Chelsea. Just want to say thank you again. We've got 7 viewers currently at the moment, and we really, really appreciate your time. This is, as it stands, the most we've had. We had 8 before, and honestly, it means so much to us. It really, really does. We're doing something right. For that, there, Jesse, have you got anything else that you'd want to bring up about Chelsea? Any more opinions, mate?
No. Just as a synopsis, I think it's fair to say Chelsea had a very, very difficult time. We've taken the piss out of Chelsea fans in private chats and Discord chats. We've given them a really hard time, and we have done so rightly as rivals. And at the end of the day, cheers. At the end of the day, the fact is, Chelsea are moving in a direction that is they're walking a path unknown, and I see signs that I think will either take them into the modern age, or will take them backwards. So I wish them all the best. The fact is, all of us would have loved to have Roman Abramovich 15 years ago.
Yes,
so I think it's just it's like breaking up with a woman, and you don't necessarily, there's no way to fix a broken situation, but you don't want to leave. And so I have total sympathy for Chelsea fans and the like. I think that it's important to just recognize that it's going to be tough over the next 12 months, because there's no way to really fix this quickly, and you're going to need to initiate a system that you might not see what's coming. But I would say Chelsea fans have faith. As I said at the beginning, the Boehly group does tend to put money into things, and they do tend to care about their sporting ventures. So there is definitely hope for the future, and that would just be my roundup.
Yeah, absolutely. My final thoughts on it would be this isn't going to be a quick fix. I think that needs to be put out there to Chelsea fans, new and old. Some Chelsea fans will have only ever known the Roman Abramovich ownership. Some Chelsea fans will have known it prior. The world that Chelsea fans grew up in between 2004 and last year is gone. It isn't coming back. They're not going to run that way ever again. And that might take some getting used to. It might take some getting used to when it comes to transfer targets. It may getting used to that you might be outbid for players. You won't have that kind of purchasing power that they used to have. So it's going to be an interesting summer. I think the most important point now is if they're going to bring in a new director of football to get the right person in, it was going to be getting the right person in the transfer window, but also equally importantly, moving on players, whether that's Lukaku, whether it's Werner, whether it's Ziyech, to sell them on, to make space, to start rebuilding the team in the image that the new ownership wants to bring in. But we've just about come up to running out of time now. I just want to say again, thank you for everyone. If you could drop a like on there for us, subscribe, share it with your friends, let your friends know if they want to come on. We really, really appreciate your time, and Jamie, obviously, for coming on. We'll be doing more streams like this pretty regularly anyway. So we're going to be probably discussing either probably Tottenham. I think Tottenham's going to be our next stream that we're going to discuss about how they've changed from the Nuno and the Pochettino years, coming into Conte taking over, and how we think that they'll go next season. So do tune in for that one. I think that'll be a really interesting and entertaining conversation. But until next time, we've been Dan and Jess at Talk Football. We really appreciate your time. Have a great day, and we'll catch you all next time. Cheers, guys. Thank you.